Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Akasha. I'm in artificial intelligence here at the SWE Foundation. So, a little bit about this space. Before we get started with introductions, this space is the second of a weekly recurring series that will continue through 526. The goal of these spaces is to bring together builders in the SWE ecosystem to come and share their experiences of building on SWE. Now that mainnet is launched, we'd love to hear the perspectives on why builders are building on SWE and what they're looking forward to in the future. Each session will be moderated by me, Akasha, from the SWE Foundation. I will have one participant from 3 ecosystem projects. So, shall we get started with introductions? Who'd like to go first?
I guess I can go first. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, coming in loud and clear.
Great.
Welcome.
Cool. Hey, I'm Brian, and I'm the CTO at Studio Mirai. Our main focus is building a sustainable community by using NFTs in creative ways. Then our hope is to leverage that community to bootstrap the governance and ownership of our upcoming products. Our upcoming flagship product is targeting the music industry. We'll have more about that in the coming months, but for today, we'll focus on our Enforcer Machine prototypes collection, which is currently minting on Clutchy. Last I checked, I think we're at around 96%. So the support has been great here since we started building on SWE. With that, I will pass it on to Jacob, since I just mentioned Clutchy.
Thank you very much. So I'm Jacob. I'm the CEO of Clutchy. We've been building on SWE since August of last year. We're gaming an NFT marketplace. We have a launch pad so that we launch the primary sales of NFTs. And then we also have a secondary trading marketplace and some other features that will be coming further down the line in the future. We've been working closely with Miston Labs for quite some time as well. And we obviously know people from the SWE Foundation very well, including Akasha, who's on the talk today, and some of the people I can see in the audience too. I'm going to hand over to Really now.
Thank you. I'm Aaron from Really. We're a decentralized social graph on SWE. Essentially, everything you create on Really is on-chain, including the profiles. Currently, we have the Really profile, which tracks all the follows, all the likes, all the content you've created on their platform. And we just rolled out the badges functionality, which basically allows you to collect these collectibles. And we're working with a number of NFT projects and also dApps that are building on Really to commemorate special events. And yeah, very excited to join this space.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. So, now that we have basic introductions out of the way, let's get started. Let's see. Jacob from Clutchy, why don't you kick us off with telling us a little more about your project?
Sure, yeah. So I think with us at Clutchy, at the moment, if you look at Clutchy, you see it's a place where you can come, you can buy assets, right? So we host mints. We've done probably 15 or so, or 10 to 15 mints since mainnet went live for various different projects. Some are games, some are NFT projects. Some are using dynamic NFTs, some are using more standard types of NFTs. And it was really like the ability on SWE to be able to fairly easily launch and then also then work with dynamic NFTs that really attracted us to the ecosystem. So that's an area that's quite important for us and an area that we'll be doing, I guess you could say, more innovation in the future. On the secondary sales side with the marketplace, we released on day one of mainnet something which was like a very, very basic MVP. We're still in beta as Clutchy as like a platform on mainnet. So we've been working on various different optimizations since mainnet went live, adding new features in as well. So I expect within probably the next 2 or so weeks, we'll have what we would consider like a full feature set for a marketplace and launchpad. And then from there on, the focus is on innovating and bringing new types of products to users. So for us, I think the priority is helping projects to innovate and helping projects to bring new experiences to end users. We think that's what's required in order to create a thriving ecosystem. So we're very happy to be working with projects like Studio Mirai and some others that have gone through the launchpad so far and some that will be coming to help to push those boundaries and bring those new interesting experiences to users.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Now, you mentioned Studio Mirai. So let's kick it back over to Brian to tell us a little more about Studio Mirai.
Hey, sure. Yeah. So in terms of a bit more about like our thesis and our purpose in the space, I guess, before we dive into the technologies later on. We sort of believe that like powerful technologies are the most powerful when they're abstracted in a way that can be used in an engaging way for people in the mainstream. So like if you think about it, crypto is like insanely powerful, but exposing like every single aspect, good and bad, is not really healthy for mainstream consumers and doesn't really like result in sustainable economic models. Like one practical example of that is like we see some projects in the space that have, for example, like their own token. And that is made possible by like providing liquidity in a peer-to-peer way in this kind of decentralized permissionless market. But at the same time, it's like when people are able to do that, what might end up happening in a smallish community is they just kind of provide the liquidity against each other. And within the community, they just trade against each other. And I believe that can end up in some toxic kind of ways. So we really believe that it's important for projects to like be very careful about exactly like what part they're abstracting to the user base. So for us, our long-term business model is sort of to like build actual products that can touch the lives of the people in the mainstream. But we need a really solid community to be able to like bootstrap the ownership of that network and to have a reliable set of core people who can participate in the governance. So that's really what we're doing in the NFT space first, because we believe it's great technology to bootstrap the community from that perspective. Yeah, so that's a bit more about our project and our thesis here and our usage of the technology.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Now, let's see. Aaron, would you like to tell us a little bit more about Really?
Sure, yeah. So we are building an on-chain social platform on Sui. The reason like we decided to build an on-chain social is mainly because of a few things, right? Currently, Twitter, for example, everything is really controlled by Twitter and obviously Elon. And later on, obviously, he's passing on to a new CEO who will probably impose her own set of rules. But with a decentralized social platform or social graph like ours, it's really the creators that are in control. So basically, all the content you create is tied to your account. We can't do anything to remove any content, and we can't ban you off the platform because all the followers that you gain is yours, right? You can take that with you to other platforms, and that's the kind of unique feature that a decentralized social platform gives you. And also, another thing that we want to add is the ability to do monetization. Currently, there is no direct way to monetize your content on Twitter, for example, but these are things that we can do because you're on a decentralized platform and you can basically just sell stuff as you want. Like the rules are, you set the rules essentially, and basically your imagination is the limit, right? And you can also increase your reach. Currently, there's no way to tie in your Sui wallet address to your social profile, but being on chain, essentially, you can now showcase what you have done on chain, and that actually reflects your profile. So, for example, if the influencer is saying that he has this position, you can actually prove it by your on chain activity. And as you perform more on chain activity on the Sui network, your profile will evolve. And that's something that we're really excited to roll out in the next couple of weeks.
Very interesting. Now, you've all mentioned something that brings me to my next question. We'll start with you again, Aaron. Why did you decide to build on Sui?
The thing that really drew us to Sui, the first reason would be the scalability. Currently, I think we all know that like Ethereum just doesn't scale very well. And the novel consensus mechanism that the Sui team added to the Sui Move language, and also, for example, dynamic NFTs, and also the concept of shared objects and also non-shared objects really makes a lot of sense for social platforms because when you post something, it's not really tied to any other activity on chain. It doesn't matter if someone is trading some NFTs or is using a DEX. The action of posting something should be relatively independent. Similarly, if I'm liking a post, these actions should not be reliant on other things that are happening on the chain. And that just makes a lot of sense because if really was to gain a lot of adoption, for example, and there's like hundreds of thousands of people posting at the same time, and I guess what's happening is happening with most social platforms. We need a chain that just scales natively, and Sui just made a lot of sense. Because if I send an NFT, as long as one validator accepts that, it can go right into the Sui ledger, right? And the second reason is the objects themselves, right? You have dynamic NFTs, you have dynamic fields. It basically opens up a lot of possibilities that was not possible with legacy chains like Ethereum and the EVM language. You can't add things to the NFTs or objects once they are created, right? These rules are set in place by the contract creator unless you do some, upgrading contracts where you have to transfer your NFTs to another contract, which is very complicated, right? We want things to be upgradable and dynamic from the start. And so it just allows us to do that. And basically, if you go into our platform right now and you start posting things, we're basically using the power of dynamic fields to power a lot of the functions that you see on our platform. And that's the main reason why we decided to build on Sui and not other chains.
Thank you very much. Now, let's see. Jacob, would you like to continue the conversation here? Perhaps, maybe you could explain the difference between shared and single owner objects as well.
Sure. I love the educational angle here. So I think one of the interesting things about the distinction here between shared and single writer objects on Sui is the programming language enables you to, I guess, like separate these different types of objects or transactions, should we say, like on the chain, right? So through having more flexibility to dictate like what you're touching on the blockchain when you're trying to do transactions, that presents itself with like lots of opportunities, right? So if we think about scalability and we think about the approach that Sui has, which is basically instead of like a normal blockchain where every single transaction goes through in the same way, here you have some transactions that don't necessarily need to go through the full consensus, as previously mentioned, right? So if your transaction doesn't really touch anything else on the blockchain and isn't really reliant on anything else in the blockchain, Sui's language enables you to determine that and then therefore have like far more scalable transactions of certain types. So we see that as a huge opportunity in use cases such as gaming. When I first started thinking about this problem space, I actually thought that it wasn't so appropriate for DeFi, but actually since then I've come to realize there are some very interesting ways in which you can even utilize this approach to scale things like central limit order books through parallelizing different order books and different markets there. So that's kind of interesting. But for me, like the immediate use case that I thought of and the reason why I decided that I wanted to build a gaming and NFT marketplace was because I thought there are tons of opportunities here with gaming, right? Having these transactions where a user in a game is doing something like running around and perhaps they're like shooting a bullet, right? So that bullet itself, there's no reason why that transaction can't happen. That can't happen as a transaction on chain, right? So you could like in theory be running around and shooting bullets, which are actually NFTs, which I think is kind of cool because you could put like a serial number on them, which is an easily identifiable object. And those types of transactions can go through very, very quickly. So I started thinking about all of these different various use cases. I just thought like some of this stuff would just never be possible on other blockchains. And that got me really excited. So yeah, for me, I think this was like one of the really key areas that made me and made the team want to come and build on Sui.
Phenomenal. Now, Brian, is there anything Studio Mirai would like to add?
Yeah, sure. So like our reasons for deciding to build on Sui are pretty similar to Relief and Clutchy, because I'd say those are like the top reasons. But we started to do some like prototyping on one of our upcoming products on these like account-based traditional blockchains. But we found that during the development, like there were times where it was kind of a cumbersome experience. And when we found Sui and kind of due to its object-oriented nature, concepts like, staking an NFT, for example, like that, something like that can be expressed by like a direct ownership between two objects rather than like changes in state across like multiple contracts. So I think this like model of ownership really lets people build more engaging experiences because it's just like so natural. Like everything in this planet, in our world, you can kind of think of an object. Like you can think if you're trying to model a car on chain, the wheels are an object, the steering wheel is an object, the seats are an object. And to be able to have like a primitive design on chain that allows you to kind of determine the relationships between those objects is just such a natural way of doing things. And beyond that, I just appreciate the focus from the Sui team on making the blockchain like both vertically and horizontally scalable, and it gives me confidence that we won't have to like rebuild everything and migrate to a quote unquote more scalable chain when products in the future, not just ours, but like the industry in general, they scale up to mass adoption. So that really gives us confidence.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you all. Now, let's see. The next question on my agenda. We'll start with Jacob from Clutchy. What has your experience been like building on Sui so far? You can be honest.
I love the you can be honest part. So our experience of building on Sui so far has been great. We had developers on our team who were pretty familiar with Rust. So coming over from other ecosystems, having built stuff on other blockchains that use Rust, getting used to using Move wasn't the most difficult thing. It only took a couple of weeks to become, I guess you could say, competent. And then from there on, I guess like Move being a relatively new programming language and the backbone of these emerging blockchains, people can become pretty fluent compared to the broader market like quite quickly, right? So there aren't really like a huge number of Move experts, so lots of stuff's really being discovered. So I think that actually in itself is one of the challenges, right? So although the programming language itself is great and it's literally designed to move digital assets around blockchains, it's still very young. Therefore, the tooling isn't quite at the same level that you might see with Solidity or maybe some other programming languages. However, the language itself is very easy to use in a general sense. So, challenges relating to that, I think one of the big challenges with building on a new blockchain before it goes live is that lots of things on that blockchain from an architectural perspective change. And then they impact the various different protocols, like the middleware built on the chain. And then as a result, when you're building an application like a marketplace, that also impacts you, right? So every time something changes at the blockchain level, it impacts the protocols that you build on top of as well, right? So they have to change and then you have to change. So that would probably, I'd say, be the biggest challenge that we faced. Lots of the technology that we built during the early stages had to actually change quite a bit, right? And then in addition to that, on top of that, NFT standards for the blockchain were changing up until the last minute, right? Right before like the blockchain went live, basically, because every time the blockchain changed, then these standards would change. So building on top of that definitely caused some issues for us. And it meant that we didn't have a huge amount of time to test our technology before the blockchain went live. But that being said, we really do like building here. Some of our developers have described Sui as like a magical blockchain. They don't really want to build anywhere else now. So that's been great. We've also been lucky enough to get, I guess, good support, you could say, from Miston Labs and then separately people at the Sui Foundation. We work very closely with a team called Origin Byte who build that middleware infrastructure on the chain in terms of NFT standards, the NFT protocol. So that's been great working closely with them. Our developers are incredibly close and share a Slack channel and speak super, super frequently to try and test out the new tech, some of which is quite experimental and looking at ways to improve and bug fix. So yeah, I'd say overall our experience has definitely been positive. And the negatives or the downsides that I mentioned are definitely far outweighed from the benefits of coming and building on an exciting new blockchain from the beginning.
Very insightful. Thank you very much. Now, let's see. Aaron, would you like to continue the conversation? What's it been like building on Sui as a protocol designer?
Yeah, for us, it's been pretty interesting. Like obviously, as we were building, there were new features added to the Sui Move language, such as display objects and kiosks that was added. But because we were building the protocol itself, the contracts themselves, there was pretty much just us that we had to, because we were designing the front end and also the contract. So it was more in terms of like development. It was just us just debating whether we wanted to add certain features to the platform. And when we had issues regarding like certain features such as upgrading the contract themselves, we could just go to the Discord and we had some contacts with certain members of the Sui Foundation, such as the DevRev team. They have been super helpful. And then some of the Mission Lab team members were also very helpful when we ran into certain problems. I think there was a feature that we noticed that was not available. So we just had to message a few people, and it was really easy to get hold of the person that designed that specific function on the SweetMove language within the Miston team. But overall, I'd say as with any new technology, there's going to be a learning curve, because as we were building, the language was still constantly evolving. Like the Sui team was still adding new functionality. So it was to be expected when building on new technology. So There were certainly nights when we were rushing for mainnet and we were like, oh, were we able to ship this feature in? And obviously we did manage to, but there was a bit of stress occasionally, especially when you're rushing for such a big and also a very tight deadline. But I think in terms of, comparing the developer experience, for example, on Sui compared to EVM, I would say Sui Move was designed for blockchain. It was designed to be an object-centric blockchain. So there was a lot of considerations that we didn't have to worry about in terms of security. So overall, I would say it was a lot easier compared to writing Solidity code because we know things would perform the way we expected it to. So I think the next step for us would be obviously to see how we can onboard more developers to build on our protocol as well. So we can basically expand the reach of our protocol, because being a social platform, we want to encourage more people to use a social layer so we can build that network effect. And I would say, yeah, it's been great. Like, I definitely enjoy building Sui Move. I find it very fascinating. And just like Jacob's dev team, once you start building on Sui Move, you don't want to build on any other blockchain programming language.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, last but not least, Brian, is there anything you'd like to share about your experience building with Mirai on Sui?
Sure. We're kind of still in the early stages in terms of our project roadmap, and the stuff that we've done so far has kind of been reliant on the work of other great teams in the space, such as Clutchy and Origin Byte as well. So, I guess I can speak a bit more about the people and the social side, because that's a very important part about building within a blockchain here. So, the Clutchy team has been very supportive in getting our collection online. We ran into some hiccups along the way, but nothing show-stopping. And it was just great to have that sense that they really cared about our team here. And on the other side, Sui Foundation has been very supportive as well with all of the builder houses that they've been hosting across the world. We believe it's super important to get people in the same space out there in the real world. And we were able to attend the one in Hong Kong, and we'll be at the one in Kyoto next month. And it's just great to be able to be in the same space and talk with people, do some networking, and all the kind of workshops that was put on as well were really educational. So our experience has been great so far. We've been ramping up on Move. Our dev also has a Rust background, so it's been relatively a smooth process. And yeah, we didn't really have to go through that initial constant change phase because we've been a bit later than teams like Clutchy. So we're glad that things are in a more stable place now, and we're looking forward to the future.
I love it. Now, I just want to say thank you to all of you for being such great early adopters. All right, so it looks like I have another question here on the agenda. What are some features about Sui that make NFTs more interesting than if they were built on other blockchains? Let's start with you, Jacob, from Clutchy.
I think we've already touched on this topic a bit, but I can go into some more depth, right? And I won't spoil it all because I know Studio Mirai will probably want to talk about some of their plans specifically in this area because they're working on some very interesting things. But I think for NFTs specifically, we have what we've already discussed, right? Sui uses objects instead of accounts, right? And as a result of that, NFTs can be more easily composable with one another. They can also change dynamically. And I guess when you read between the lines of what that could mean, I think there are a million use cases. Essentially, the way that I think about it is it makes it more easy to build interactive experiences for users. So if you want to do things like have NFTs where an external information source triggers them to change, you can do that, and you can do that more easily here. So if you want somebody's location in real life to be fed in via an oracle, and that information then causes triggers of changes on the NFT so that it maybe looks different, or maybe its metadata changes and the information associated with it changes, then you can do that, right? Similarly, you could have financial markets, right? And you could have the price of an asset in the real world or the performance of a portfolio of assets, right? As that changes and something relating to maybe somebody's real world investments, or maybe the economic performance of, I don't know, a country or something. You could have it so that visibly, and the information as well, on an NFT, can change to reflect that information. So that's kind of cool for users. And then that starts to make me think of 1,000,001 use cases for even like brands with loyalty, right? You could have real life consumption of assets. And then a company like Starbucks could do their loyalty program, right? So I know that they're building one on another blockchain, but if they were to build that on Sui, it could be very interesting for them because they could have real world consumption of their coffee and their foods. They could have that feeding into the NFTs and making the NFTs change and develop, right? Similarly, you could do it for Nike every time somebody's buying a new pair of shoes or being loyal to your brand, right? Like they could have something on chain that levels up. So I think that's very interesting. And I think of many use cases outside of gaming where that's the case. I was speaking with the Mentaport team not so long ago. Now they're building an experience. I think they're also an official partner of Niston Labs where they're doing geotagging of locations. So if a user could go along to maybe an in real life event, I think they can track a user's location down to a few square meters, right? So if you are somewhere specific, then maybe you can have an NFT then in your wallet, which changes or unlocks new levels based on that. You can put that technology into games, which I think is very interesting. So you can think of Pokemon Go type experiences, or you could even have an experience where maybe it's a fitness challenge, right? Where you want users to get out and cover a certain amount of mileage in a day, or maybe they actually need to go and get to a point on top of a hill, for example, which is a bit of a challenge. You could have NFTs and drop a collection where, you're incentivizing that sort of behavior, which I think is very cool. And technically, I guess these things are buildable on other blockchains, but really the unique thing about Sui is that barrier to entry is just so much lower for the people building these things. And then the scalability of the blockchain enables you to have these on-chain events triggered frequently where things change. So in my eyes, it's a completely different ballgame when you're building here. And again, one of the things that excites me.
Very interesting. So, Brian, it sounds like Jacob queued you up to expand on what he didn't mention.
Thank you, sir, Jacob. Yeah, so as Jacob mentioned, we're working on some interesting things in the NFT space. And to do that, we're really using the concept of objects owning objects aspect of Sui. And I would say we're using that in like two distinguishable ways in our upcoming Enforcer Machine collection, which the prototypes actually just sold out a few minutes ago on Clutchy. So let's go. But back to the topic. On chain, the whole concept of the Enforcer Machine is that you basically have a kind of skeleton robot which you can attach and detach traits. So there's like 9 classes of traits, and you can basically, since traits are their own NFT as well, they also will be available on their own marketplace. And the cool thing here is that you can change your traits after the fact. And actually swapping out those traits will trigger our 3D engine to like re-render the image for that machine. So how that's expressed on chain is very simple here, because we're able to have a system where an object can own an object. So we're able to say like the base machine can own its traits, and it's basically able to lock up those traits within the base object. The other DNFT kind of feature in our collection is a leveling up system. So each trait has a minimum level requirement that is required in order to equip it. And in order to level up, people have to burn our ecosystem token. And the interesting thing about this token here is that it can actually only be earned by engaging within our community. It can't be purchased on a DEX. There will be some rules on the contract level to kind of enforce that. So like the Enforcer Machine owners are able to level up by actually minting NFTs that represent a level. And then the machine again itself is able to own a bunch of these level up tokens to increase the level. The interesting thing here is that in traditional system where you're able to level up something, it's really just expressed as kind of an integer without much context. So what our system allows for here is that each level up token, you can see who was responsible for minting that. And in order to mint it, you need our token, which can only be earned by engaging in our community. So we're basically able to tie an integer on chain and give it some context, right? We're able to say like 20% of the levels were created by this person. Another 10 were created by this person. So you can think of like if you're playing like a Pokemon game, then you share it with a few of your friends or people in your family, and you're all trying to level up the Pokemon. Well, how do you kind of determine after the fact in a provable way who was responsible for leveling up which Pokemon? So that's what our system kind of allows for here. And what that effectively will allow us to create is an API that we can query to determine who the most engaged members in our community are. We can kind of say, look across all of the Mashin in our collection. There's over 3,000 of them. And then we're able to inspect the levels, and we're able to know who did it. So we're able to prove who put in the time to engage and stuff along those lines. So we plan to leverage this API to be able to reward the most engaged people with benefits and perks on our upcoming products, as well as, make the API available to our partners who are looking for engaged individuals in a provable way. And I think that's super important and kind of scarce in crypto, because it's a lot of systems and incentive models that we've designed in crypto are kind of designed for community members to take more than they give. And we've kind of desensitized to that, I guess, with all these airdrops and, stake this token and you earn some inflation. So we've created this environment where it's almost you're incentivized to do as little work as possible to gain as much as possible. And that's not a way to grow a community in a sustainable way. So our whole take on this is that we want to be able to provably say okay, these are the most engaged people, and we'll go ahead and reward those people. Because you really want to reward the quality and not just the quantity. The quantity is really short-term thinking. So we're able to build this kind of system because of, the object-based nature of Sui, and it allows us to implement this vision in a very tangible and practical way. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, let's see. Aaron, is there anything you'd like to add about features on Sui that make NFTs more interesting?
Yeah, I think Sui is an object-based blockchain, unlike most blockchain, which is address-based, which means there's a really high degree of composability. And there's a lot of stuff that you could do that is just not possible. I think, for example, if we were to build our social platform or social graph on Ethereum, for example, there would be a lot of limitations in terms of what you can do with the NFTs. You would have to ask the contract owner to add these functions. But with Sui, you don't really have to do that. As long as you can think of a way to interact with the type of object that you're creating, there's a lot of stuff you could do. So cappies is a great example. So you're able to merge them together to create a unique cappy. Or in our case, we could use our NFT and interact with, say, Clutchy's NFT that you minted on Clutchy's platform and create unique types that is very different. For example, if I'm in a Fuddies NFT example, I can use my Really profile and tie it to that NFT and have my name written on my NFT's chest, right? So these are various things that we think could be really interesting. And also our NFTs can evolve based on, your on-chain activity, which is not possible on Ethereum-based NFTs. So as you trade on Clutchy's platform or on other DEXs on Sui, your profile might look a bit different, right? It might have various visual elements that make it look very unique on our platform to highlight that you're a degen NFT trader or a whale that provides a lot of liquidity on some of the DEXs such as Cetus or Turbos, right? And I think these are interesting things that are just not possible on other blockchains, and we're really excited to see how we can create new experiences using dynamic fields and dynamic NFTs on the Sui blockchain.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Now, I'm looking at our agenda, and I think we've mostly covered everything. So I'd like to give you all a chance to give us your last remarks. How about you, Aaron, from Elite? Would you like to kick us off with any closing remarks?
Sure. I think we're one of the first social graphs on Sui, and we're trying to create a very strong, we want to work with as many NFT projects and also dApps or marketplaces that are building on Sui. We want to be able to allow people to evolve their profiles as they do more activity on chain. I feel like that's a unique aspect of blockchain that's just not possible on Web2 platforms. Basically, want to create profiles that evolve and really highlight highlight your on-chain activity, right? I feel like this hasn't been done before, and being able to showcase that within the social platform is going to create a lot of very interesting dynamics. For example, if I was on Twitter and then if I was able to prove my on-chain activity, people might view me differently, and the things that I write or tweet might mean differently as well, because I'm no longer just an anonymous character tweeting about certain things, but I actually have evidence on chain to back up whatever I'm saying. So if I'm a whale, you can actually see my position. But I can imagine that people might not want to have their Twitter profiles tied to their wallet addresses, probably because of some security issues. So they might have a separate identity on Really just to tweet out, this is something I'll do. And maybe this might, affect other people's decisions on chain. Maybe they will want to buy into this collection, right? Because they can see that you actually have a large position, or they might avoid it because they think you might dump on them, right? So I think this could be a really interesting experience in terms of a social network. It's going to be very exciting, and we'll be really excited to roll it out in the coming couple of days or a couple of weeks as well.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Now, let's see. Brian, would you like to share any of your last closing remarks?
Hey, yeah, sure. So at Studio Mirai, I would say our long-term kind of business model is not dependent on the financial success of our collections. Obviously, consistent high trading volume is great, but our goal is really with our collections is to build like a genuine and honest and sustainable community. And we put a lot of work into our internal economy and like different gamification strategies to make this happen. And yeah, so we believe that communities again can really only sustain over time if members give and take. Ideally, give more than they take. That's how things typically grow. So it's important for us to be able to curate the right group of people who share a similar vision as us. And we believe that doing it through NFTs is a great way to do that. So ultimately, we want this community to be the early adopters of our upcoming products. And yeah, we're looking forward to sharing more about that product in the coming months. And we're super excited to be building on Sui. So glad that I found this blockchain out of all of those blockchains out there. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone for hosting and participating in this space.
Phenomenal. Thank you as well. We're certainly glad to have you. Now, last but not least, Clutchy, are you there? It looks like you got rugged.
I got rugged, but I made it back perfectly in time. I'll conclude quickly because I don't know how long my reception's going to hold out, but I would say from our side, keep an eye on the projects that we'll be launching over the coming weeks. There's some really interesting stuff coming, and there's plenty of innovative ideas, including people like Studio Mirai, who are currently minting, obviously. They've got a very exciting roadmap, as you guys have heard. We've got plenty of new features on the way and optimizations as well. So this next 2 to 3 weeks will be very interesting for us as we start rolling out the full feature set of the marketplace. So yeah, hit the follow. If anybody wants to slide into the DMs, you can hit the Crunchy ones up. They're open. We'll respond. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you as well, all of those in the audience. Now, like Jacob said, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. And also, don't forget, we'll be doing this again next Friday. So with that said, it looks like we're ready to wrap up. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next time.